Well, I'm Jerry Haag, local resident. I have no historic ties to Healdsburg, but my wife is a fourth generation Healdsburger. So I'm kind of basking in reflective glory here. Um, my goal today is to provide you with a little sense of what Healdsburg was like during World War II. I'm hoping in another 30 or 40 years, we're not going to be doing this about the Iran war. I guess we'll see. Let's see how this works. So, you guys have probably heard about Pearl Harbor. Both my parents said it was the defining moment of their lives and their generation, just like the Kennedy assassination was for my generation. Uh, so, what was it like in Healdsburg? I had a long chat with Joanne's mom, who was born in Healdsburg and lived here all of her life. And she was in her 20s during the war. And she said everybody was totally scared that the Japanese were going to invade because they just wiped out our fleet in Pearl Harbor and there was no protection left for us. And she was right. The Japanese did attack. A submarine surfaced off the coast of Santa Barbara in early 1942 and shelled a oil refinery north of Santa Barbara. So what was the first thing we did? Well, of course, round up all the Japanese citizens. And to talk about that, I'd like to introduce Patrick Makita, who's the past president of the museum board and an all-around good guy who has a lot of interesting insights from his family. So this is the top of the war memorial in our plaza. Many of you have probably walked by it. I don't know if you've looked at it. It was built in 2007 by a local resident who funded it. It's a memorial to all the men in Healdsburg lost in all the wars so far. 37 are from World War II. So in comparison, I used to work for the city of Cloverdale. They have a similar war memorial. They have 4 names on theirs. We have 37. 2 of the names on the memorial are my wife's uncles. I'll talk more about them later. Well, the first side effect of the war, labor shortage. All the men get drafted or volunteer for service, including my father-in-law. So how are the crops going to get picked and all the chores done in town? So there were 3 solutions to this. First, during the war, all the commercial shops in Healdsburg didn't open until 1 p.m. And in the morning, the clerks and stockers and people who worked in the stores went out in the fields and picked prunes. Then went to work at 1 o'clock. Secondly, as you see in here, those are the braceros, a Mexican guest worker program devised by the government in World War II, where Mexican laborers came up and worked in the fields and got paid. So one interesting little story that my wife's cousin told me, who was here during World War II, she worked for Rosenberg's and Bush department store downtown. And on Saturdays, the owner, the Rosenbergs or the Bushes, stocked up with extra cash, and they cashed the checks of the braceros because the banks were closed on Saturdays. A third source of labor, in the smaller picture, Camp Windsor, a German POW camp just 6 short miles down the freeway. Of course, there wasn't a freeway then. I'll talk more about them in a minute. So, how to prepare for victory? Victory gardens were encouraged by all levels of government. There was a large 3-acre community garden sponsored by the Exchange Club just north of the McDonald's on Healdsburg Avenue. The city of Healdsburg, to encourage victory gardens, gave free water to gardeners. So that was like an encouragement to grow your own. We also had homemaker make-do stuff. So this was canning and preserving fruits and vegetables that you grew in your victory garden. Nylon stockings were not available. You sewed or repaired your old clothes, and you adjusted recipes to suit what you had on hand to cook. So when we did this talk 2 years ago in the plaza, Meredith Dreisbeck baked a make-do cake and passed it out. Unfortunately, she didn't do it this time. Sorry, you lose. Another important thing, war bonds. We financed our victory in World War II by citizens giving war bonds. I read in the Tribune that a lot of local stores donated their display windows to buy war bonds. And and then of course the hospitality house. I think it was the USO. The building is the American Legion building, no longer there. It would be in Mitchell Center if it were here today, but it's long gone. So what are the things that war bonds finance? I learned this little interesting tidbit. This is a P-47 fighter. If you can't read it, it says City of Healdsburg, California on it. So the school kids collected money and they bought this airplane. It cost $80,000. So they were built on Long Island, New York. But I discovered that there was a secondary plant in the United States where they built them as well. It was located in Evansville, Indiana, which is my hometown. So the first job I remember my dad having, he worked for International Harvester, a big company. At that time, they made refrigerators. And I remember picking him up one day and he worked this really huge dark green plant. And I asked him, how did the plant come to be? How did it get here? He said, oh yeah, during the war, they built P-47s there. So there's a chance this P-47 could have been built in my hometown. And of course, rationing. A lot of the good stuff went to troops fighting overseas. So a lot of items were rationed during the war. Flour, meat, bacon grease, gasoline. You could get 5 gallons a week. No tires were available. You had to buy recapped or fix it if you could. No new appliances. And of course, no new cars. All the car manufacturers were making tanks and bombers. So here are a couple of shots of things in town. To the left is a Healdsburg High dance. The pirate guy looks a little sketchy to me. And the couple are the Schmidt family, longtime farmers on Dry Creek Road. Their daughters are now docents at the museum, so they're still connected to the city of Healdsburg. And the Tribune, yes, they published during the war. They kept us abreast of what was going on in the world. More life on the home front. I don't know what that is, but it looked like an interesting photo. And the Red Cross meeting in the plaza. And a Red Cross van that looks a little dangerous. And does anybody know who this fine man is here? Belinda would know. Yes, that's Edwin Langhart. He was a CB during World War II. He later became Healdsburg's first city manager and founded the museum. So he's kind of a famous person. His daughter's here tonight too. We have to talk about Smith Robinson. So he was a local character in town. He was a janitor at the high school and I think later at the hospital. When the war broke out, he went down and volunteered to serve. But no, we couldn't serve. He had a bad heart. So that didn't stop him. He did the next best thing. He improved troop morale by writing up to 300 letters to local servicemen per week, mailing packages to them with care packages. And then he started a local newsletter that he mimeographed with all the goings on in town to mail them to our soldiers. As World War II morphed into the Korean War, he did even more for the servicemen, and we adopted a local battalion in Korea. Later, he was a guest on This Is Your Life national TV show in the early 50s. So always politics, a campaign for Roosevelt and Truman. And if you didn't know that, Roosevelt won. That was 1944. So blackout curtains were required in case there was a bombing. They had air raid wardens to enforce it. And each week, the Tribune read a little small box saying what to do in an air raid drill if one got called, which I don't think it ever did. So here on the left, we have the airport. It was Santa Rosa Air Base back in 1944 when it got established. But they carefully camouflaged it to look like a farm so it couldn't get bombed. And on the right are some of the people in our local camp who you might recognize from TV. Lastly, I want to close with a discussion of my wife's uncle, Richard Buchignani. He was born here at Healdsburg in 1924. He was a 1942 graduate of Healdsburg High, and he did his patriotic bit. He signed up at the war. He was signed up in the Army. They assigned him to the Army Air Forces and became a tail gunner in a B-24 heavy bomber. And unfortunately, in 1944, he was lost over the South Pacific. So my wife never got to meet him. He was killed 7 years before she was born. So if you have any questions, that's all I've got here.